7 letters. Old Mr. Moon and young Dr. Barnes and Gervase Eden, surgeon of Harley Street, Sister Marion Bates, Jane Woods and Esther Sanson, and Frederica Linley, VADs. Higgins shuffled the envelopes together impatiently and wrapped them round with a piece of grubby tape and thrust them into his pocket, plodding on, wheeling his bicycle up the hill. He could not know that, just a year later, one of the writers would die, self-confessed a murderer. I've been reading Golden Age mysteries pretty solidly for a while now, many of which are British Library reissues, and I'm always eager to find more titles from the 1920s through 40s, rediscovering names that have become, in many cases, unreasonably obscure. Christiana Brandt, E.C.R. Lorac, John Dixon Carr, Anthony Berkeley, Alan Melville, J. Jefferson Farjan, the list goes on. The freshest of these reads is Green for Danger by Christiana Brandt, a hospital thriller set during World War II. I had been saving this one up for a special moment, and finally suddenly found myself hurtling through its pages the other week, spreading it out as long as I could, and finishing it at the weekend in a gasp and a chuckle. Close, so close, for Brandt is a master of misdirection. Just as you think you've guessed who done it, you discover who didn't, and the rug is pulled from under your feet with the aplomb of a seasoned conjurer. Green for Danger, published in 1944, is set in the early years of the war at a hospital in Kent. As bombs fall, doctors and nurses huddle over operating tables, battling death on all fronts, so to speak. Not many surgeons remain unmoved by a death on the table. The patient may die on his feet, if he will, or in his bed, or even on the trolley bringing him up to the theatre. But to die in that shining little room with the hot, bright lights beating down upon him is to cast a gloom over a group of comparative strangers, to clutch icily at hearts that will not be warm again until a succession of straightforward, everyday cases has brought back reassurance and strength. Major Moon said sadly, "First time this has happened since I've been here," and pulled up a blanket over the dead man's face. They stood round in stricken silence, gazing helplessly at the quiet form. Eden's thin grey face looked more grey than ever. Barney was white and miserable. Sister Bates' blue eyes round with horror over the green mask. There was a small black speck on the bosom of Woody's gown, and she picked at it with nervous fingers. Moon, who was a Catholic, crossed himself with unobtrusive simplicity and said a little prayer. 2 big tears gathered in Esther's eyes and rolled down her cheeks. Green for Danger is an Inspector Cockerell mystery, featuring the sparrow-like, fine-headed detective, the Terror of Kent, as he is affectionately called. It is also a closed-ring mystery. The number of suspects is limited to 7, each with their own unique backstory. The popular Dr. Eden, a melancholic Harley Street practitioner swamped by female patients and cheerfully nicknamed Don Juan, although he never understands what women see in him. Barnes, the anaesthetist, who has been involved in an inquest on a girl dead under his supervision in the operating theatre. Jane Wood, who in civilian life designed delicious, though impractical, siren suits and posted them to Mr. Cecil of Christoph's in Regent Street, who paid her 3 guineas apiece for them and thereafter presented them as his own. Nurse Sanson, devoted daughter who dutifully signs up to be VAD. Cold, efficient Nurse Linley, who is engaged to Barnes but feels a magnetic attraction for Eden. Jealous, distraught Sister Bates, who has had a brief fling with Eden and has fallen under his spell, and gentle widower Major Moon, eyes twinkling with kindliness, still grieving 15 years on for his dead son. Joseph Higgins, postman, pushed his battered old red bicycle up the long ascent that leads to Herons Park, 3 miles out of Heronsford in Kent. It had been a children's sanatorium before the war, and now was being hurriedly scrambled into shape as a military hospital. Its buildings stood out big and grey and bleak among the naked winter trees, and he cursed them heartily as he toiled up the hill, his bicycle tacking groggily from side to side of the country road. All this for a mere 7 letters? 6 miles out of his way for a handful of letters that would probably not even be looked at till the morning. He spread them out fanwise in one hand, his elbow resting heavily on the handlebar, and examined them resentfully. The first was addressed to the commanding officer. "One of the new medicos," guessed Higgins shrewdly, holding it up to the light. A nice linen envelope and a Harley Street postmark, and the doctor's handwriting was always illegible. The first chapter opens with Higgins, the postman, grumbling his way up the hill to deliver 7 letters, and as he pauses to shuffle through them, we are introduced to each of the main characters, in short, punchy scenes that might have been written with a silver screen in mind. Brand draws on her own experience as a VAD during the war, together with the experience of her husband, a surgeon, and vividly describes the environment, the scenes, and atmosphere of life during the Blitz. Her characters are lively, believable, and recognizable in their foibles, fears, and loyalties. Detective Inspector Cockerell, arriving at the hospital 2 days later, could not have been in more entire agreement. "Don't see what all the fuss is about," he grumbled to Moon, fishing for papers and tobacco in the pockets of his disreputable old mackintosh. "Just another anaesthetic death. You doctors slay 'em off in their thousands. However, I know young Barnes' papa quite well, and I happen to be over this way, so I thought I'd look in myself. I suppose you can give me some lunch?" The mess secretary was with difficulty persuaded that rations for 20 might, without positive hardship to anybody concerned, be stretched to supply 21. Afterwards, Inspector Cockerell made a tour of the hospital, popping his head into wards and operating theatres in his darting, bird-like way. Small and brown and irascible, his shabby old felt hat crammed sideways on his head in the familiar Napoleonic fashion. Sergeant Bray followed ponderously in his wake, keeping a weather eye open for anything gorgeous in the shape of VADs. "There's nothing much to be done here, Moon," said Cockerell at last, briefly. "I want to get back before the blackout, so I'll just see the widow first, as she seems to be clamouring for audition, and then I'll buzz off home and report that the death was just the private misfortune of the gentleman in question, and that they may as well let the thing drop." He stumped off to the small and dusty office that had been put at his disposal for the afternoon, and, rolling himself a wispy cigarette, flung his hat and mackintosh into a heap on the desk, and sat down before it and composed himself to give ear. Cockerell is called in to investigate what should have been a routine operation, but which ended in death. He starts with a dismissive attitude that there is nothing to be seen here, but tongues wag, and then at a staff party, Sister Bates, hysterical with jealousy of Eden's infatuation with Nurse Linley, announces that she knows something about the murder. She runs off and is later found dead in the operating theatre. Adding a touch of Gothic horror to the intrigue, she is laid out on the operating table, dressed almost ceremoniously in surgical gown and boots. There is no time to be lost, and Cockerell sets out to discover the murderer before more lives can be lost. There was not a sound in the theatre, and when he turned on the lights in the lobby, still there was no movement or sound. The key was in the door to the theatre itself, and he gave an angry exclamation and turned it and took it out of the lock. "Going off and leaving it like that. I'll report this tomorrow, nurse. You see if I don't. Getting me into more trouble. I'll report it." "Perhaps she hasn't finished," said Woods uncertainly. "She may be coming back or something. Ought you just to take the key away? She may be still there." "What, sitting in the dark?" said McCoy derisively. Woody thought it not impossible that Sister Bates might be sitting in the dark, even in the operating theatre, and she might have lured Gervase there on one pretext or another, and be having a little petting party with him. She could not help grinning to herself at the thought of the happy couple being locked into the theatre all night, and of the explanations next morning, but she said loyally, "I do think you ought to just open the door again, Sergeant, and make sure there's no one there." "Well, if there is, why don't they say so?" said McCoy crossly. He opened the door, however, and switched on the light and poked his head inside. "Nope, no one here." But the words froze on his lips, for there was someone in the theatre after all. Laid out ceremonially on the operating table, rigged up elaborately in a surgical gown and mask and gloves, with huge white rubber boots on her feet, Marian Bates lay very silent and still. There was a jagged tear in the front of the gown, its torn edges wet and sticky with drying blood, and thrust into her breast and deep down into her foolish heart was the tapering, delicate blade of a surgeon's knife. Cockerell plays cat and mouse with the suspects, and the gradual build-up over the days that lead up to the dramatic revelation is very effectively drawn by the author. The mental strain, the gallows humour all the characters rely on to get them through, including puns one might indeed murder for. The policewoman's name was Miss Pine. "I don't know about pining. I wish to God she would fade away," said Woody crossly, after a full day spent under this lady's observation. "The only place you're private in is the hur-ha, and even then she rattles at the door and asks if you're all right." "It's for your own safety," said Frederica, mimicking Miss Pine. Moon and Eden and Barnes were under the care of a gentleman called P.C. Willing, and it became the preoccupation of what Woody called Leper's Paradise to promote a love affair between Miss Pine and P.C. Willing. "But Mr. Willing won't," said Woody plaintively after a long evening spent in this exercise. "Darling, your puns couldn't be more nauseating," said Frederica. Vivid, tense, suspenseful, Green for Danger is a classic page-turner. The popularity and sheer quality of the novel led to its being filmed only a couple of years after publication, starring Alistair Sim and Trevor Howard. Reluctant to leave the world so vividly described by Brand, I sought out the film as soon as I'd finished the book and thoroughly enjoyed it. It's wonderfully filmed, well deserving of its accolades as the best adaptation of a golden mystery novel, and the cast is superb, with a real sense of edginess and tension while retaining the original humour. For Brand is witty and entertaining, something she shares with contemporary mystery author Patricia Wentworth, another favourite of mine. It is well deserving of its reprint by British Library Publishing and a welcome addition to any mystery lover's bookshelf.